Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the crypto.news show. I am your host, Tony Noto, and with me as always is...
Dorian Batitska. Hello, Tony.
We have an exciting show for you today, an exciting Q&A on deck. We have the co-CEO of Empery Digital, Ryan Lane, along with Gemini's head of institutional, Brad Vopni. How are you guys?
Doing great, thank you.
Great, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. It's our first time doing two at once, so it's going to be an interesting little dynamic now. I think lots to talk about. Treasuries,
Gemini,
stumble,
a fumble, no doubt. But I'm excited to have this conversation. It's very timely. Gemini is obviously in the news. It's a very exciting time. I know you're very tight-lipped on a lot of things, a lot of developments. The Ripple Lifeline, for example, the IPO in the works. But just talk to us a little bit about, set the stage for us, so why this is an exciting time before we dig into the nitty-gritty of what you guys got going on in your projects.
Sure. Thanks, Tony. And again, thanks for having us. So, I mean, for those that maybe don't know, Gemini is a full service crypto platform that, enables individuals and institutions to securely buy, sell, store, and earn digital assets with a, kind of robust regulatory compliance and focus with a user-first product and experience. And I think these are exciting times for Gemini. But I think, generally speaking, for the industry, and I think that we have finally reached a point where some of the, regulatory challenges and uncertainty are actually starting to become tailwinds for the industry as a whole. And we've seen changes here in the administration in the U.S. And the administration is moving to pro crypto. We've seen changes in the regulatory framework where the SEC, CFTC, and others are looking to embrace and understand and lean into how to provide a framework that allows individuals and institutions alike to lean into, understand, and adopt digital assets as a whole. So from a macro perspective, it's incredibly exciting. And obviously, Gemini having been around for over 11 years in the space, it is a great time to be building and supporting this ever growing ecosystem.
Yeah, and Ryan, you're a bit of a crypto skeptic, I guess, as Brad was just saying before the call here, coming from the world of, let's say, TradFi and asset management. I mean, what are we looking at now in terms of the current state of the market, and how are equities now coming on chain, and sort of what's your view on that?
I'd love to know, Ryan, why were you a skeptic? And then go into Dorian's question. I mean, we have to know.
So, I mean, I could talk to that probably for about 10 hours, but I'll try to keep it brief. It was hard for me to get my head around what purpose the blockchain and Bitcoin would serve. From a transactional perspective, I said, okay, so it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of time to transact in these things, and so how does that fit into a traditional payment system? How does that fit into a traditional finance system? So I struggled with that, and I didn't appreciate that it was really a store of value from a Bitcoin perspective. And then I looked at the blockchain as this human engineered system that just consumed a lot of energy, and I didn't appreciate the fact that it was really this beautiful open ledger that allowed people to, see everything and see the transparency of everything. So I was kind of closed-minded about it. I didn't do the work, frankly, to really dig in to appreciate what the elegance of this blockchain was. Once I started to dig in, once I started to appreciate that it wasn't really about Bitcoin being used on the dark web. It wasn't about Bitcoin being used on Silk Road. Those were just avenues for people to nefariously move value, right? And it really is I believe that blockchain is the most transparent, open ledger system that can really transform all these transactions within society. And Bitcoin is just one example of the expression of trust of that system, right? $2.3 trillion of expression of trust that exists on that system, right? And
But Gemini has a lot more than Bitcoin, right? You know, Gemini offers stable coins. Gemini offers assets of all kinds and equities of all kinds. Brad, where is Gemini leaning into with respect to all of these different on-chain assets, whether it's stables or even real estate or even tokenized securities? Like, where are we at now in terms of like putting things on chain, and what do you think the future holds for all of that?
Well, as it relates to Gemini, I think we want to be the venue or point of entry for participants who want to express a thesis or get access to any digital asset, and really anywhere along their journey. And so whether they are net new to crypto and want to link their traditional their bank account as a means to deposit USD and buy any number of digital assets, or whether they are degens and are looking to either trade a lot or stake or generate yield on assets they may hold, or use our qualified custodian custody product to safely secure those assets. We have recently launched the ability for non-US users to get access to a number of stocks by way of digital assets. And we, the idea of a variety of real-world assets moving on-chain has been, talked about sort of ad nauseum now for a number of years. It is, I think what's very interesting is that we are starting to see the very early days of that happening, and we are starting to see the permutations of that. And, I think we're, again, going back to the regulatory front, I think we're starting to see the technology layer sort of starting to be decoupled from what the regulatory framework is. And what I mean by that is, I think the SEC and others, if there are real world assets that are stocks, regardless of how they move around, they are still stocks. They are still governed by the SEC. The same rules necessarily apply, but the underpinning technology that really is transformative, that gives people access to all of these assets, is sort of being decoupled. And we've seen the regulatory bodies start to consider that, appreciate that, and really understand that. So Gemini is really doing a ton of work to support, I don't even say the traditional tokens at this point, but really anything that moves and can be wrapped in a digital asset format.
I would love to talk a little bit about how expensive it is to run an operation like Gemini, and when you factor in the technology, the manpower, the all of the work that goes to make sure that Gemini is the brand name that Brad and Ryan hope that it could be. Give us an idea as to how difficult that is and the challenges, because obviously financials for Gemini have been under scrutiny. It can't be easy running a shop like Gemini.
No, it's not easy. That's part of the excitement. And I think that is part of the testament to, Cameron and Tyler's vision when they started Gemini, 11 years ago, and the ability to execute and run at the scale they do, with the personnel. I have been at Gemini for, almost 5 months now, background in and around both crypto and traditional finance and markets. I continue to be impressed on a daily basis at the ability for Gemini to roll out product at the scale and at the jurisdictional level that it does. One of the things that is interesting, obviously, about crypto is that it is not jurisdictionally specific, generally speaking, right? Investors, typically or historically retail, from all over the world have expressed a view by way of a variety of digital assets, be they Bitcoin, Solana, Ethereum, and others. And so the ability to run 24/7, to manage the infrastructure globally, to ensure that we have all of the security that is required to operate in the digital asset space. It's impressive, it's difficult, and I think it's a testament to the quality and caliber of people that have joined and built out Gemini to date.
But can you talk a little bit more about that flywheel, and how it operates, whether it's like the exchange side of things, the custody side of things? Where do you see the future of exchanges? Are they going to become banks?
I have a little perspective on that. From my perspective, right, as a CEO of a public company, right, right now we have very traditional exchanges that exist within these jurisdictions, right. And if I want to list my equity, I have to apply and meet the listing standards of that jurisdiction, right? An exchange like Gemini provides international access to someone like us. All we have to do is tokenize our security, right? And now with Atkins at the SEC setting a framework for this, you have companies like ComputerShare, which are the leading transfer agents, exploring, and they've done meetings with the task force at the SEC to pursue tokenization, right? And so you have all these different forms of holding your securities. It can be DRS, it can be in the DTC system with the brokers, or it can be physical, right? Now you have tokenization. And if you have a permissioned exchange like Gemini, and we can put our token onto their trading system, anyone around the world can have access to it, right? So I no longer have to go and apply at all these different exchanges for my security to be listed. People all around the world can have access to my tokenized, right, validated security because it's issued through my transfer agent, right? And then it goes on chain, and if it's on a permissioned exchange, it's going to be trusted, right? It's going to be known to be mine, right? It's going to be known to be the actual security. So
and is that a function of the insurance element, though? Is that a function of like this idea that Gemini has a $200 million insurance slush fund that will provide against fraudulent hacks? And, are we seeing the sort of maturation of this where it becomes no longer about like this sort of like, oh, you're just sending some Bitcoin to some guy you just met, maybe on the Mount Gox, and maybe you might get it, maybe you might not. Like, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, where are we at that maturation stage of like the industry, and not only Gemini, but the industry writ large?
Well, I mean, I think, just to correct, less so a slush fund, more so an insurance fund that exists, that we have a policy with a large, very reputable,
to be technical, in fact,
international, company. But I think that it is an important thing to note, because obviously, security is sort of paramount to anybody operating in the digital asset space. And I think the security element, permeates everything that we think about. It starts with, custody. It starts with, physical access to the building. It starts with, business partners. It's something that we continue to drill down, because it is ultimately one of the elements that is required, specifically because of what you alluded to, where historically there have been cracks in the ecosystem, some of those less nefarious than others. And I think what we've seen is I think a general maturation in the industry as a whole. And I think what we're seeing now, and I think this ability for Gemini to support Ryan and what Empery Digital is looking to do is further validation of the fact that professionals in the capital markets have gone and looked. They've done their counterparty risk assessment. They've done their due diligence. They have gone through the policies, the procedures, the requirements to ensure that like companies like Gemini have all of the buttoned up ability that institutions are not just accustomed to, but need in order to feel safe and comfortable kind of dealing in the digital asset space. And so it's a very weird thing to say, but what I would say is the failure / incompetence / criminal activity that we have sort of seen in a burgeoning space has actually been an element that has required us to go far above and beyond and find ourselves moving at a pace that allows us to ensure that we can give Ryan and team and others comfort that they are used to with sort of traditional service providers.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, the traditional finance world is very keen on diligence and counterparty risk and digging into all that. And a lot of people in my world walked away after some of the issues of the past, right? And it took kind of where we're at from a regulatory framework, a regulatory tailwinds perspective, to come back, right? Because
and I have a question about that for both of you. Ryan, you're coming from Empery. Brad, you said that you're 5 months in from Hudson River, right?
Hudson River Trading.
So I was curious, what reservations did you have, or any concerns or worries that you had? I mean, obviously, both reputable companies and firms. You're settled into your roles there. Why collaborate with Gemini? And were there any sort of red flags that you noticed or reservations that you had about working with Gemini? Because obviously it had its issues in the past, especially on the institutional front with FTX, Genesis. 2021 was basically a disaster zone. So I'm kind of curious, was the timing just right? Did enough time pass, or did you still have those lingering worries of what it would be like to work with the Winklevi?
Well, I mean, maybe I'll start, Ryan, then you can sort of have your purview in terms of as you went through it and thinking about who to kind of work with. But from my perspective, I've known the Gemini team organization for a number of years. Again, the way and before my time at Hudson River Trading, I spent a long time kind of in the equities marketplace, specifically at NASDAQ and other ATSs and ECNs. And so, I think I have an interesting point of view as it relates to, where an exchange, again, which is not the sole function that Gemini provides, but where an exchange sits and the utility that exchange-like functions provide. And what I would say is, I actually think one of the things that drew me to Gemini was not just Cameron and Tyler, but the management team here as well, and actually the way they handled their the issues they had with Earn and returned one for one every single crypto to every single counterparty was actually a deal solidifier for me. I think that was they operated in a way that most others hadn't operated. They were client focused. They fought for their clients. They did everything they possibly could to ensure that at the end of the situation, clients were made 100% whole. And I think that, look, I never want to say that becomes a thing that is a positive, but I do think that is a signal and an indication of the quality and the principled approach that Gemini has operated under, and I think is a reasonable signal for how this firm as a whole operates, and frankly drew me to it. I also think that, I do think that going back to your earlier question, the idea of having an exchange is a competitive element that we can build upon, and having the ability to attract institutional clients, and again, anywhere they are along their journey, but certainly part of their journey is, converting, fiat and USD into some crypto thesis, be it Bitcoin, be it ETH, be it all the other sort of digital assets that we provide. That is a massive entry point, and I think Gemini's, technology and opportunity is incredibly well positioned at this moment.
Yep. Yeah. I have a perspective on that too. As a firm, we started our hedge fund in 2008. Right, we started it in very tough times. It was during the financial crisis. And we've always had an eye towards long-term, sustainability of the fund, doing things right for our investors. And as a fund and being in the fund space, it's very rare that you see someone as dedicated as we are to, making right for the investors at all costs. Right? Someone shows their true qualities when their back's against the wall, and it is. We saw a very similar thing. I've listened to Bitcoin billionaires and the way that Tyler and Cameron thought through the process of securing their keys after they pulled them from Mount Gox to fly around the country, and just to have the forethought when it didn't even have that much value then, right? To have the vision that we need to protect this thing because it's going to be worth so much in the future, we believe, right? To have that long-term perspective. And the fact that they reached into their own pockets and made things right for their clients, that is not normal, right? Within the society we live in, it's usually driven more by greed and selfishness than by things like that. So if you're down in the trenches with people like that they're going to do the right thing, and that's the people in life that you need to associate with, and that's why we're here, right? Because I know they're going to protect my Bitcoin just like they protected their own. I know that they were thinking about it 10 years ago. And so I know that they have robust processes and procedures to be able to protect it, because at the end of the day, that's my job to make sure it's protected for my shareholders. So I've got to make sure it's at a place where they're thinking the same way I do, right? So it's
absolutely,
it's the little nuances.
Touching on that, the sort of biggest news item, I guess, of the last few months have been all these treasuries that have popped up, whether they're Bitcoin treasuries or Ethereum treasuries. And do you guys have any thoughts on any of these, whether it's their current MNAVs or what we're seeing here? What are your sort of thoughts on all this?
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple of things to say. I think that it is these are still early days, though. I read yesterday that I think we've seen almost $15 billion pour into these vehicles in 2025, and so it feels weird to say that it's early days and that's the kind of capital that we've seen come in. But I think what that also means is that there is additional. This is the start of something versus the end of something, and so. I think it's important to differentiate kind of the two firms that have an approach. So we've seen firms add crypto to their balance sheet as just sort of part of their general treasury functions, and so that looks like Tesla did that. You've had a number of other firms, Semler Scientific, and a few
the
other.
U.S. government.
The U.S. government, El Salvador, yes. But that's a massive signal, right? But yes, from a corporate perspective, you've seen firms that have added that to the balance sheet. And look, I think that becomes much more commonplace and frankly, kind of standard operating procedure over the coming months and years. What we've also then seen are these larger plays where companies are raising money to put all that capital to work in a public vehicle for Bitcoin, and we've seen sort of other versions of that. Obviously, Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy being the first and loudest and most obvious, but we have seen a handful of other plays. And we've seen sort of a variety of nuanced versions associated with that. And I think the idea there, and I'll turn it over to Ryan to sort of talk about his, explain a little bit more about Empery Digital, but the idea there is that like these public vehicles are the cleanest and easiest ways for institutional money to come into the space. And so I know we've had ETFs in the space for a while. For a variety of reasons, those may not be the appropriate wrappers or vehicles. Obviously, for a variety of regulatory, compliance, legal reasons, it's been hard for some of these institutions to get access from a spot perspective. Really, what this really provides now is an opportunity for institutional money to come in at a scale and size that we've yet seen to get access to either BTC or other assets.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. There's those two sides, right? Some are just doing it strategically as part of their treasury, and then there's others like us where it is a strategy, right? It's a strategy to become a permanent capital aggregator of digital assets, and we're in the Bitcoin camp. I think Bitcoin's the clear winner in the store of value asset, and we're pursuing it as a true strategy to be as efficient and transparent as possible to build the biggest portfolio we possibly can of what we think is going to be the store of value of the future. And I agree.
But
with Brad
what makes it
front end of
Bitcoin
that.
for you? What makes it Bitcoin for you in the sense that, like, a lot of people have compared Bitcoin to digital gold and Ethereum as a sort of digital oil for whether it's the tokenization of,
Right.
AI credits to whatever. Like, what makes Bitcoin a better store of value in the future of the internet than, let's say, Ethereum?
Right.
Yeah. Look, I think that the other assets right now are a little more speculative than Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin has a $2.3 trillion value. That is larger than most GDPs around the world, right? I think there's only 9 GDPs that are bigger than that. So to me, that just feels like I'm not speculating on behalf of my shareholders. It feels like I'm buying the clear winner. And there will be other technologies. There will be other players in the space, but I think this is the one that's going to meet the criteria just from a vol perspective, right? If you just look at Bitcoin's vol over the last year, it's been sliced in half. It's gone from over 40 to right around 20 now. So it's going through that price discovery phase, and it's getting closer to mature. And I don't want to speculate for my shareholders. I want to buy something that I believe the federal governments are going to buy, the municipal governments are going to buy, the state governments are going to buy. Right, it meets the criteria because it's big enough, it's stable enough, and if they pass laws to add things to Treasury, it's probably going to have criteria that has greater than $1 trillion in market value and things like that. Things like New Hampshire's done, right, where they're going to add up to 5%, and Bitcoin's the only one that meets the criteria pursuant to that law. So I think, at least for me, this is the place to be for now. And we just. At some point in the future, will we consider adding other assets for other strategic values? Absolutely.
Well, I think the interesting thing there is that that we've started to see other reasons by which people are using sort of the public markets to facilitate this, and so. Obviously, I think from a diversification, from a hedge against inflation, like the ability or almost the need to facilitate this and do what Empery Digital is doing is fundamental. But from a strategic and growth opportunity, we're seeing other participants kind of take similar but nuanced approaches. And you've heard of not just other companies that are sort of doing the same thing with Ethereum. And Solana recently, CEA announced, their approach with BNB. We've now seen jurisdictional approaches, right? And so the Parataxis Silverbox deal is going to be the first and only, South Korean native vehicle. And so you're starting to see other sort of branding strategic elements of why people want a publicly listed vehicle as the means of access to not just BTC anymore, but other value propositions that people have high conviction about.
Yeah, and we can professionalize it, right? Because I have a $500 million Bitcoin portfolio. I can trade derivatives around that. I can generate premium and yield for my investors. I can store it really well. I can get reinsurance. I have kind of the leverage and the infrastructure to be able to protect it like an individual might not be able to, or an institution might not want to, right? So it starts to get really interesting because if you're big, you can do things that you can't when you're small.
Well, I'm curious when it comes to the institutionalization of Bitcoin. What are some of the other things that companies are saying? I mean, is it just because of, we can bolster shareholder value, we can diversify our assets? Or are they really worried about geopolitical risk, inflation, the whole financial system collapsing? And so if they accumulate Bitcoin, they sort of see it as an escape route. I mean, let's I want to know what those folks are thinking.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's an escape route. I think it could just become M1, M2, right? Because especially for a country that has an unstable currency, this makes perfect sense.
But
Is
it the United States that they're worried about?
I think that people currently look to the United States for that stable currency, right? They look to the United States to be the place where they park their money to stabilize their own economy, right? Buying USD, buying bonds. Yep.
Even with respect to that,
continue, Ryan. Dorian, give me. I want to hear him finish that thought.
So I think that if you have federal government buying up Bitcoin, that it will stabilize federal governments literally all around the world, right? And to the extent that everyone owns them, then you've stabilized the whole international system, right? It starts to become really, really interesting. And, large owners of Bitcoin, become influential within that system, right? At some point. And I think that you have, even with the current administration, right? They attempted Doge, right? They tried to balance, right? They did it aggressively, and they did it, in a way that you would imagine would work, but they still couldn't balance the budget. We're still debasing our currency, right? They're still printing. We have a fixed asset here, right? That we know what the max number will ever be in 2040, right? And that starts to look really interesting when everyone's just addicted to debt around the world, whether you want to be or whether you don't want to be, right? I guess that's the definition of addiction. And I think that Bitcoin and other digital assets, I think specifically Bitcoin, will be the place where everyone can stabilize everything from Cyprus to Venezuela to Argentina, right? They should be adding this to their treasury, and they should be migrating more and more value into it over time, right? And the more everyone does that, right? And then at some point, your vol basically becomes close to zero because it just sits in all these treasuries around the world and is very stable. And basically, what every treasury, what every federal government is worth based on the amount of Bitcoin they own.
But what does the treasury then become? Because if Strategy, controls 5% of all the Bitcoin in circulation, what does that do for the ability to use it as a means of an exchange? Like, does the Strategy at one point shift from becoming a publicly traded company to, that is engaged in sort of a treasury aspect to a bank? Like, where does that leave sort of the small person who who's maybe not even born and has no Bitcoin now?
Yeah, I think that a company like Strategy will eventually, morph into more of a bank, right? And I think that probably will happen. I think you'll probably see stuff like that. I can't speak for them, but I would imagine if I were in their seat, that's the type of thing I would be thinking is where do we go from here? How do I protect this? How do I become a institution who can serve my clients, right? Their shareholders in the best way possible. And I think it's by putting a banking framework around that system, right?
Yeah, I think that idea of that framework, right, is the idea that probably resonates, or at least with me anyway. I don't think either of us can speak for Michael Saylor and or MicroStrategy, but it becomes a very interesting dynamic when the underpinning assets are available equally to all, either natively or by way of a public vehicle. And I think that that sovereignty and agency for individuals to have like what is effectively a level playing field is one of the beauties of Bitcoin. And so the fact that retail has led it to date and been the tip of the spear, and institutions are, again, early on in the journey, I can say with a straight face for the first time ever that institutions are coming into crypto. Every time I heard that over the last sort of 7 years or so, I'd have a smirk. But and so I won't smirk now, but it is still early, and I think that is it's important to appreciate. But the idea that like you have individuals and people who were much earlier on than institutions that have accumulated a portion of this asset that companies, institutions, nations, governments are equally going to be accumulating is like the dynamic is a very interesting one, and I think kind of supports to some extent kind of what the original sort of concept was in terms of giving people the ability to have self-agency and sovereignty over their financial well-being and ecosystem.
Yeah. I mean, so from my perspective, when you talk about the traditional money coming in, so we raised $500 million on a 7-day roadshow, right? 80% of that was traditional hedge funds, traditional capital. The other 20% was, from the crypto ecosystem and people who, own Bitcoin and are involved in that ecosystem. But the fact that 80%, right, $400 million came from traditional funds is pretty astonishing. Where, I mean, last year, this time, no chance. You would have raised, hundreds of dollars.
Right. Well, we're approaching the 36-minute mark. We've kept you longer than intended, and this has been an amazing conversation. I appreciate your time. I know Dorian does as well. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to leave our listeners with? Expectations for the coming months? What your hopes are for Gemini and the future of crypto and institutional involvement? We'll start with you, Ryan, and we'll wrap up with Brad.
Sure. I'd love to check back in a month and see where we are, because I think things are at such a rapid pace that it'll be really interesting to see the evolution from month to month. It's no longer in years to years anymore, I don't think. So I look forward to, evolving this conversation.
Agreed. Brad?
Yeah, I mean, things move quick. And while we're still early, things move fast, and things seem to move fast, even faster, even in the crypto space. I mean, I think the next few weeks and months in both crypto and at Gemini are going to be incredibly exciting. We have a number of new, products and initiatives that we look to launch. I think you can always get in touch with us by way of institutional@gemini.com. And keep abreast on the app and on the website, and stay tuned for more exciting stuff from us.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ryan and Brad. Wonderful.
Tony, Dorian, it was a real pleasure. Great questions. Yeah. Thank you.
This is all ours.
Thanks so much for your time.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Okay.
Cheers.
Cheers.